All right, welcome. Today we're going to jump right into a really key piece of Swiss employment law, the fixed-term contract. So you might think it's a simple question, right? But in Switzerland, well, the answer is not nearly as straightforward as you'd imagine. You see, how a contract ends really truly depends on its DNA. Is it a fixed-term deal, or is it meant to be indefinite? Okay, so here's our game plan. We'll kick things off with the basics. What exactly is a fixed-term contract? Then we'll talk about its built-in end date, whether you can get out of one early, and a really important pitfall called the chain contract trap. And of course, we'll wrap it all up with the key things you need to remember. All right, section 1. First things first, let's get on the same page. What are we actually talking about when we say contrat de durée déterminée, or as it's often called, a CDD? So think of it like this. Unlike a permanent job, a CDD has a self-destruct button, a built-in expiration date. It could be a specific day, like December 31st, or maybe it ends after, say, 6 months. The key thing, the absolute non-negotiable part, is that everyone knows the start and end date from day one. And this really gets to the heart of the matter. It's a totally different philosophy. A CDD is built to end. It just stops. A permanent contract, or a CDI, is the opposite. It's built to last until someone takes active steps to end it, with all the notice periods and legal protections that come with that. Okay, next up, that pre-programmed end. This idea that the contract has a built-in finish line is, without a doubt, its most critical feature. And trust me, Swiss law is very strict about this. So here's the core principle, the golden rule, really. The end date can't be some vague, fuzzy idea. It has to be, and this is the legal term, objectively determinable. Both sides have to be able to look at it and know exactly when the job is over. No guesswork allowed. And here is a perfect example of what you absolutely cannot do. Why is this a no-go? Well, think about it. Who knows when that colleague is coming back? Could be 2 weeks, could be 2 months. The doctor could keep extending the sick leave. That makes the end date totally up in the air. It's undeterminable. And that breaks the fundamental rule of a CDD. So, what happens if you mess this up? What's the consequence? Well, the law doesn't just say, oops, invalid contract. No, it does something much more dramatic. It transforms it. Poof, your vague fixed-term contract is now automatically considered a permanent one, a CDI with all the protections that come with it, like notice periods and everything. All right, so this naturally leads to a big question, right? What if you want out early? Can you just quit? Or can your boss just let you go before that end date? The short answer and the general rule is a pretty firm no. A fixed-term contract is a promise. It's a commitment from both sides for a specific chunk of time. In principle, you are both locked in until that date hits. But, of course, there are exceptions. There are always exceptions. The law gives you a few escape hatches. For example, if both of you agree to end it, that's fine. Or if there's serious misconduct, what's called just cause, that's another way out. There's even a weird one for contracts over 10 years long. But by far the most common way to end a CDD early is during the trial period. Now, if you're going to have a trial period, it has to be agreed upon in writing. That's super important. And it can't be longer than 3 months max. During that time, either side can decide to end things with a really short notice, usually just 7 days. And it gets a little more nuanced. The trial period also has to make sense. It needs to be proportional to the total length of the job. I mean, you can't have a 3-month trial for a 4-month contract, right? That's just silly. And for a really short gig, like just 1 month, you probably can't have a trial period at all. Okay, let's move on to what is maybe the biggest trap for employers and a huge protection for employees. I'm talking about chain contracts. What happens when you sign one fixed-term contract and then another, and then maybe another, all with the same company? The legal system in Switzerland is really suspicious of this. Why? Because the courts see it as a potential loophole. It looks like a way for a company to keep someone working for them long-term, but without giving them the job security and protections that come with a permanent contract. It's kind of like being in a state of permanent probation. So, here's a good rule of thumb. 1 contract and then 1 renewal. That's usually okay. The courts generally don't bat an eye at 2 contracts back-to-back. But once you go beyond that, that's when you start wading into some risky legal territory. So what happens when you get to that 3rd contract? Well, if there isn't a really good, objective reason for it, like, say, you're filling in for yet another person on maternity leave, the courts are almost certainly going to see it as a deliberate attempt to get around the law. And this is the real kicker. If the court decides the chain is abusive, they don't just change that last contract. Nope, they go back in time. They reclassify the entire working relationship from the very first day you started as one single permanent contract.
Now, to be fair, this doesn't mean chain contracts are always illegal. Not at all. They can be totally fine if there's a legitimate, objective reason for each new contract. Things like replacing someone who's out sick, doing seasonal work like being a ski instructor, or working on a specific time-limited project. The key is that there has to be a genuine reason for it, not just trying to avoid a permanent hire.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. Let's boil it all down. What are the absolute key things you need to walk away with? Okay, let's do a quick recap. Number 1, clarity is king. That end date has to be rock solid and known from the start. 2, you're locked in. Early termination is rare, it's the exception. 3, the trial period isn't automatic. It has to be in writing and it only counts right at the very beginning of the whole relationship. And finally, number 4, beware the chain. Once you hit that second renewal, you're in the danger zone for being reclassified as a permanent employee. And that really brings us to the final and maybe most important question you should ask yourself. Whether you're an employer or an employee, take a hard look at the situation. Is your fixed-term contract really fixed? Or is it actually a permanent job just wearing a temporary disguise? Because at the end of the day, in Swiss law, it's the reality of the situation that counts, not just the title you put on a piece of paper.